delighted to be taking this session with Philippa, who is a producer that I very much admire and look up to, and so yeah, stoked to be here today. A round of applause for those Emmy nominations. Bold. 8 of them, no less. Hey. Microphone check. So Philippa, I just wanted to start right at the beginning of your journey on Top of the Lake. How did you come to be involved in the project?
In an accidental way. Quite a lot of my work in the film industry has been accidental. Beautiful accidents. I remember Neil Finn talking about once, and I think this certainly was one of them. I was rung up by a mutual friend of Jane's and mine, and she said to me, are you in town? I said, yes. Are you around at 4 o'clock this afternoon? I said, yes, I am. She said, well, would you have time to meet Jane? And I went, yeah, I would, because I did have. So I went to her apartment, and Jane was there, and I had sort of imagined that I'd heard that Top of the Lake was, she was writing it, and being me, I'd not rung anybody and said, I need to work on this series, I'm a total fan of Jane's, and anyway, there I was, and I thought that she was maybe asking me for some advice about something or whatever. After maybe 10 or 12 minutes, I realised that it was a little bit more complicated than that, and that she said that they were looking for a producer, a New Zealand producer, and I said, well, I'm not a line producer, which I'm not. And she said, no, we're looking for a producer. So at that point, I became I tried to be as calm as possible. And she took my photograph, and I don't like having my photograph taken. It's slightly intimidating in a way, but that was also very interesting. They sent me the material, and I read. Jane had written a kind of statement about the project, which is possibly one of the most exciting 3 pages of prose I've ever read. Kind of up there with Andrew Bavell's speech this morning, from a writerly point of view in terms of ideas and characters and themes and things. And the first episode and the treatment for the other 5. And it was extraordinary, and I really wanted to get together.
Yeah.
And I did.
And so did you feel like when you left that dinner that it was your gig to lose, if you like? Like, did you walk up and I'm going to be involved in this, or was there still a process thereafter?
Oh no, there was definitely a process. I mean, there was a point where I thought, apologies to my colleagues here, all fabulous producers, I know who my rivals will be. I must go and, hire a hitman.
Yeah. Kneecaps.
Yeah. And also, it wasn't just the opportunity to work with Jane. It was also about the material. I mean, I was just completely overwhelmed by the material as I read it. It was astounding. And so there was a process, yeah. But that was the beginning of the process. Ended up happily. Yeah.
Awesome. Oh, no doubt about that. Yeah. So did it at that stage? Where was the rest of the team at? Was it a certain thing at that point?
Yeah, absolutely was a certain thing. Seesaw were the Australian producers, and Seesaw's an Australian-UK company, so Emil Sherman was the man on the ground, so I went to meet Emil. Garth Davis had been engaged as the second. There was Trish Downey, the line producer, had done a budget, so there was a team around the project.
Yeah.
Gerard and Jane had been co-writing right from the beginning, so that was where we were at that point.
So how did that team and the kind of co-production side of things work during the script development phase? Were you involved in across that?
Yeah, I was. I wasn't. We had some meetings, and the material would arrive in my inbox, and I'd read it and have conversations on the phone, and Yeah. It was a working with a great artist is different from working with someone who wants to become a great artist, and it's a real privilege to be inside a creative process. It's not that the creative process always goes beautifully, and you have to kind of find a place to be inside that process. And I know that as a producer is one of the things I really love. And I get it wrong sometimes, and sometimes I get it right. Yeah, so it was kind of really simple. I mean, at one point, we had an extraordinary week, I suppose about a year in, before we started official pre-production, or even unofficial pre-production, where in Sydney it was a week where Christian Vesper from the Sundance channel came out. Lucy Richard was supposed to come from the BBC but couldn't at the last minute, but she was on the phone, and Ian Canning, who's Emil's UK business partner, was there, and we sat around the table with Jared and Jane. They had given them 2 huge big bouquets of lilies, these beautifully scented lilies, as kind of like congratulations. We had all 6 scripts at that point, and we were sitting in a really nice room in Paddington, and we started to talk about the whole series and about the stories, and the lilies just sat there completely abandoned. I mean, they did get put in vases, but I don't know whether either Jane or Jared took them home. They were sort of excited and nervous and a bit overwhelmed, but I think for us also to sit around a table and kind of improvise with Jane Campion and Jared Lee is a pretty cool thing to do. There were some great minds, and it's certainly Jane's, as a creative leader, her vision, kind of leads the story, but it is bigger than all of us, and I think, acknowledging that and having the resources to bring that to the screen so beautifully was a great, really exciting thing to do. And that week, it was bigger than all of us. We had a lot of fun.
Awesome. And so you didn't know Jane at all prior to this?
I knew her a little bit, but not intimately, and we have sort of some mutual friends, so, but I wasn't an inner circle person.
Because how many producers have we got in the room today? And how many directors? Writers? Okay, cool. Pretty split sort of cross section there. But yeah, as a producer, as an emerging producer, earlier in my career, the idea of what you're explaining, this experience is of course the dream. Such a remarkable opportunity. So when you were talking about finding your place as a producer in this team and in this unit, and with a creative that you greatly respect, and that's probably that's a fresh new experience compared to prior projects. So how long did it take you to kind of find your feet in that relationship, and how did that dynamic eventually evolve? Like, what was that place that you found?
I'd just like to point out, it's not that I don't respect the other filmmakers I work with and am working with, it's that their level of experience is just different.
Indeed.
Because I do respect them all, otherwise I wouldn't work with them. I think, one of my anxieties was that it might be a get me this relationship.
Sure.
I don't know whether you understand that, but that would be, I would be there as the servant of the artist and just delivering whatever they required. And it wasn't like that at all. And I think the kind of, again, in service of the story, there is a sort of alchemy that was created for those of us involved in the sort of, top echelons of the series of making it. That also seeped down into the whole crew, because we did spend a lot of time together, because we shot for 4 months, so that's a long time, and different from, a film shoot. Where I think yeah, I had to sort of figure it out, what my place was, and come to understand what I might do. I was the person on the ground, right through the whole process, so I was kind of continuity of everything, and a lot of it was about, I sort of had trusted that if I really understood the story, I knew the story spoke to me profoundly. If I could understand it and articulate it, that was going to help me get through everything. And there were times, and I said this to you, I said to someone else just half an hour ago, where I felt overwhelmed by the job and really thought, I have no idea what the next step is or how to deal with this situation. But there always was a next step, there always was something. And I think that sort of understanding, I mean, it sounds awfully sort of weird and a bit spiritual, but I think somehow that understanding was what, and commitment to the story, and knowing the story was bigger than all of us, and responsibility to it. I think that was kind of, that gave me confidence to do the job.
Yeah. So basically, if you had your value system always serving the work kind of first and foremost and serving the story, then you felt like that would
get me through.
Yeah.
That would get me through. And also it made all the difficult things that you get emotionally tied up in and beat yourself up about or whatever, gave it a sort of objectivity. It was a way to ask an objective question rather than panic about a subjective question. Also, there was a terrific team, you know. It's a hugely collaborative job, what we do anyway, and I was working with people who were really, really, really good at their jobs. That was amazing. Yeah.
And talking about those fabulous people, one of the exciting things as a New Zealander and as an actor myself was sitting down and just watching how many Kiwi cast there were in the production and how much they shone. I just thought the standard of the performances from our own fraternity was incredible. What was the casting process like with Jane? I guess the international as well as the local.
Is Tina here?
Tina Cleary, are you here?
Emmy-nominated casting director Tina Cleary is not here. The search, the Australian casting had already begun, and there had been a search all over the place. Jane had been looking for the actress to play Robin for a long time and not really found her. Had found a few candidates, but hadn't found the right one. And she workshopped with some actresses and spent time with some people. Peter Mullen came on board quite early. I can't quite remember the timeline of all this. And David, who's another person you can talk to about the series, who's here as well, came on board quite early. Oh no, maybe not. But anyway, he was sort of in place. But so there was this ongoing search for where is Robin Griffin, and there was a point where I felt very strongly that the New Zealand casting needed to start happening. And there had been some discussion about whether it would all be done out of Australia, but in the end it wasn't, which I was very pleased about. And we engaged Tina as our casting director, and that was kind of another way in which I started to learn how to work with Jane, was around the casting. Our first casting session together was her, me and her dad, Richard, who passed away about 6 weeks ago or 5 weeks ago now, in the boardroom at the Film Commission, looking at tapes and just talking about people, with him making these really astute comments about actors. It was amazing to see father and daughter working together in this session, and I mean I'll never forget that moment. That was so cool. And the first big, the usual process, subs were sent out, agents and felt that every actor on their books was suitable for every role because it was Jane Campion. So there was a lot of interest, as you can imagine. And it was a very comprehensive casting process, I felt. Anyway, there were lots of people auditioned. And the first session we had was in Wellington again, hosted very kindly by Piper Post, thank you very much, who didn't do anything except be really, really nice to us and support us. We weren't doing post-production, but that was kind of lovely. Where Tina and Lauren and Jane and I looked at stuff, and Tina and Lauren were nervous. I was nervous. I was very, I hadn't seen anything, and I thought, God, what if my friends and colleagues, what if they're terrible? What if it's not going to work? What if everybody's dreadful? And because the tapes that Jane and I and Richard had watched were all from Australia. We'd had a big session about the Australians in New Zealand, which is kind of nice. It was really wonderful. I mean, of course, they weren't terrible. There was amazing work that was done in those auditions by actors who were cast and weren't cast too. It's not always about the actor, it's often about the match and the material and all the rest of it. But it was also lovely to see Jane going, God, I haven't worked in New Zealand for so long, and look, all this talent. And that was great, because she is a director who really feeds off the collaboration with performers. So that was exciting.
Yeah, and so leading on from the casting and the relationship with the actors, was Jane very active in the casting process, during the callbacks and stuff?
She workshopped with some actors.
Yeah.
Yes, she did. Yeah. And I have it on good authority, having spoken to them, that was pretty exciting, I think, for them. The other thing, we had a big search because there are a number of children in the story, and the story has adult themes for those of you who haven't seen it. And so that was a whole other kind of quest, really, to cast the children, and all of them. Well, Jackie lives in Auckland, who plays Tui, but everybody else is local. They're all kids from Wanaka, Queenstown area. So that was another adventure, really. But yes, there was, in which there was workshopping with Jane, and in fact Jane workshopped with Jackie before we cast her too. So yes, she was. Yeah. She wasn't.
And then I guess all fed into the rehearsal process. And
3 weeks rehearsal.
3 weeks rehearsal, right. On location? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that's a bit of a production challenge in itself, I guess, and one that,
I mean, the producers in the room will all know that, and I'm sure, Tom, you've had this, where the director says, I always have this.
Yeah.
And with Jane Campion, it's like, well, okay, you probably always do, but I wonder if this is real. I wonder if it will just fall away. I need this, or I want this. So she said, I always have 3 weeks rehearsal, and I went, well, I wonder if that means, I wonder if that's a negotiation point, or whether, well, it was actually 3 weeks rehearsal. And it was which was in so many ways, fantastic. I don't know, have people sort of seen it? Some of you have. Okay. Well, in the trailer you can see there's a section where Holly Hunter lives with these women, middle-aged, the women's camp, which is in a valley by a little lake, and that was where the women's camp set with the containers and everything, and that's where we rehearsed before we shot there, because we shot there first. But yeah, it's difficult because your director disappears from the rest of the crew, and as you know,
decision making is
yeah,
difficult.
it's very hard.
3 weeks full time is a big chunk.
Well, it wasn't utterly full time, but it was sacrosanct private time for her and the actors.
Yeah. And was it very clear that that performances were pretty much, or the work that was going on with the actors was at the top of a hierarchy, if you like, in terms of priorities during the process?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
One of her anxieties, and one of all of our anxieties, was, I suppose, we were filmmakers making television, which is different. We weren't working within a television system. and we weren't working, the writing, it wasn't written as conventional television might be written, with X number of minutes in a major set and, you know, dashing out to do the odd location shoot. It was nothing like that. So it was very, very ambitious. And you know, we had to get numbers of minutes a day, 4 or 5 minutes a day, which is not, you know, that's people, those of us who make television would be going, oh, easy peasy, you know, and on low budget films people are shooting 9-10 minutes a day. But that sort of speed was an anxiety, and not just about the directorial challenges of it, but also about how can the set remain a relaxed and playful place in order for the performers to, you know, be the characters in a relaxed and playful manner, and that's very much was very much the ethos of the shoot and the way Jane sort of approaches the work. It's, I think.
So what does that look and feel like then? What
Sometimes
is
it feels like a lot of laughing and cups of tea, you know.
Right.
It's not a boot camp. In my experience in theatre and film too, I mean, it's sometimes rehearsals appear to be relatively aimless and quite mysterious events. And often out of that is a wonderful cooking process that goes on between the story, the director and the actors. You just kind of, I find that absolutely fascinating. Every director has a different approach. And there was also, I mean, I've heard really interesting stories back about apparently what happened in those rehearsals that, you know, I know what happened, but there are apocryphal stories out there about weird Jane Campion shit that went on, which I think is all very, it's good that those stories are out there. They're rather fantastical, but it was all, you know, that there were characters.
Sorry, we're struggling a little bit to hear you guys.
Oh, okay.
We're trying to turn the microphone on for the audience.
All right, I'll talk
All
louder.
right.
Yep.
Projection, darling.
Projection, okay. There are, you know, a number of the actors. It's a, you know, it's kind of almost like a western, and set in a rural area. So for actors who were urban creatures, you know, they had to feel relaxed in that environment and sort of feel truthful. So authentic but heightened is a kind of style. You know, authentic with an X factor, that the performance is sort of hit in Top of the Lake. And I guess it was finding that, but just sinking into the world. We all went a bit feral, Tom.
As you do.
As you do.
Was it always the plan for the series to premiere at Sundance? Was that something that was set up right from the beginning?
Is this working? Yep, okay. It wasn't set up from the beginning, but it was something that they worked, the channel, I mean, obviously there is a relationship between the Sundance Channel and the Sundance Festival, as you can tell, and they spoke to each other about it, and once they saw, I can't actually remember what it was that they saw. Maybe it was 2 episodes or something. They went, that really changed their minds. They kind of went, yep, we really want this, as opposed to, this is breaking an enormous precedent. How do we place television inside a film festival? Is that going to undermine the integrity of what a film festival is? You know, I mean, those of you who are, you know, Andrew spoke about it this morning, that it's no secret that, you know, there is a lot of really, really interesting stuff being made in television is in the States and in the UK, but, you know, there's been some extraordinary stuff out of the States. And, but they just wanted to be clear in their own minds about why they were doing it. And, I mean, of course they were doing it for commercial reasons, to get it, you know, to launch it at the American audience, or for the American audience in a way that they would embrace, which they have done. but you know, it wasn't a straightforward decision for them.
Yeah.
But when they saw it, it really did make a difference.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I mean it's kind of like it's a microcosm. That move from the festival is kind of representative of all those things that you're saying. It sounds like Andrew was saying earlier, with these kind of just smashing down of the walls between TV and cinema, I guess, and also our perceptions as storytellers and producers, and you know, we've all kind of in the past had a sort of highbrow, lowbrow kind of attitude towards TV and film, and yeah, I mean, top of the lake from my perspective, you know, hugely, obviously, cinematic. So did it feel like you guys were? I guess it would have just felt like you were making a number of films back to back. That, you know, like it was that kind of it was a total cinematic approach.
Yeah, I mean, I know what you mean by cinematic, but I'm sure we mean sort of different things, but yes,
Yeah.
it was.
Yeah.
I mean, in minutes, it's the equivalent of 4 90-minute films, and that's what we shot and made. In story structure terms, the first version, there are 2 versions of the series. One is which we delivered to this territory in Australia and the UK and Europe, which is 6 hours. It's 59 point something or other minutes. And in America, we delivered 7 episodes because of their different, that are shorter. They have a different, you know, broadcast requirement.
Ads.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, but at the end, we didn't have ads in the middle.
Right.
On the channel. So, so sort of from formal terms, we were structuring something. I mean, this is particularly related to post-production that was shaped over an hour, which is a really lovely amount of time in storytelling. I think it was. We all kind of got very fond of it. That length of time.
Yeah.
Times 6. But I mean, yes, we. You know, we were, I mean, I've worked in television here, but not for a number of years. So I kind of know the systems and I know the approach, and I've made, you know, I worked as a script editor and a writer on TV in the 80s. But one of the things that was incredibly cathartic, I mean, this is just being selfish really, but it was really cathartic, was for us, we, as part of our post-production process, we had a test screening where we screened 3 hours on a Friday night and came back first thing on Saturday morning and screened the next 3 hours, and then sat round and did that painful "what did you think" conversation, which you know everybody has to go through. Yeah. And it was in a it was at Fox Studios, and it was just on a, you know, reasonable screen, but it wasn't graded or anything. But it was a real blast, and to go to Sundance and the Berlinale and to see all 6 hours looking remarkable, looking beautiful, and to get that sort of wallop of the whole arc of the story, for us that was so satisfying. It was just fabulous. It was, you know, and that was, you know, it does sound very indulgent, but it was amazing. And I think if we hadn't had that, I mean, we might not have missed it, but because we did, it was like, wow, this is great. It was very fulfilling.
Yeah, I bet. I actually watched the whole series in one day as well.
I love you, Tom.
Yeah.
I knew you were my kind of guy.
Pulled the curtains out of Pihar and all. Yeah. But I'm very interested to talk more about what the on-set kind of energy and what that dynamic was like on set. What Jane Campion said, if you like how did the crew kind of fold into that, and did that vary from other productions that you've worked on in the past?
It's a very complex question, isn't it? Multifaceted. And it's not just a Jane Campion set, it's a Jane Campion set and a Garth Davis set.
Yes.
And so sometimes they were both on set at the same time. Jane mentored Garth, but also he would come down to give her a hand on stuff that she was a bit anxious about, like action sequences or something where there was going to be visual effects, you know, delivery and post-production. We had a few stunts where that was, oh, actually he shot the big ones, but there was some that she did. Like there's a whole fight sequence on a boat, and so he was really helpful to her in planning all that. And just about everybody in the cast was very seasick. Nobody had good sea legs, which we of course didn't know. But I suppose there's a level of aspiration and also anxiety that I really don't want to stuff this up.
Yeah.
You know, you want to do your best,
Yeah,
and
so
I
it
think
felt
that's
like
so it really, you know.
everyone's on their toes.
So the feelings that I had
Yeah.
were, I'm sure, echoed, you know, all through the production.
Yeah.
But also, again, that's where the in service of the story thing comes in handy, because it's bigger than you, it's bigger than everybody. So if you have that shared understanding, and we were shooting in a remarkable place, and shooting. I mean, people were very highly skilled, so that all sort of did come together. You know, Adam Arkapaw, who's the director of photography, is just extraordinarily gifted. And he, you know, the directors came and went, but he was on set every day. And that's very, it's, you know, you can imagine for him how big that job was, working with two directors. The thing that we all kind of came to understand, and I think we're all very proud of it now, is that, and Garth also struggled with it at times, like the authorial, what's the authorial thing in there for him as a director, and what it is. I mean, he was always absolutely committed and totally understood, and he is the most generous, lovely human being, but that he was there to fulfill the vision of the story. So what we have now is Top of the Lake. And when you watch it, you can, you know, different episodes are credited for different directors, and that is the case. But inside each of those episodes, some of those sequences were shot. You know, Jane shot for Garth and vice versa. I mean, he went off and had a baby at one point, which I wouldn't recommend to anybody.
During production.
So, yeah, it was. How was it different from other sets? In some ways, not any different.
Yeah.
And in other ways, it was every set is different, isn't it? I mean,
Just the unquantifiable kind of
just
energy.
like
of
your
the
set
piece.
on Dark Horse would be special and different from ours. I don't think. I don't think it was. And all those usual anxieties of, goodness me, what about the weather and shit, we still haven't sorted out that location, and oh my God, you know, the completion guarantor's coming tomorrow, and what are we going to tell them, and you know, all that stuff.
Yeah. All that stuff. So it sounds as though, even with the experience that you took into the production, you were still kind of, in many ways, hyperextending in this, or at least on a learning curve, like even at your level of experience, Philippa.
Well, I've studied film at university in a rather dodgy kind of a way, made probably the worst short films in the world, which have been destroyed, thankfully. But I learned so much. I mean, it was like going to film school every day in a way. That sounds sort of silly and romantic, and I had a big job to do and I was incredibly busy, but it was, you know, just because of what we were doing, we hadn't done it before.
Yeah.
So everybody learned a lot.
Yeah.
And that's, you know, those of you who've just made your first short or your first feature, or you know, aspiring to do, you know, when you do something for the first time, in a way Andrew was talking about it too. He said something about when he was a screenwriter, the first time he didn't know anything, and so you sort of take risks and you sort of feel courageous in a particular way, and that was part of the spirit of this. And I think also, you know, Seesaw's are great, those guys are fantastic, and right from the beginning Jane went to the BBC and said, this is my idea, and they went, we love it, make it. And so there was a great degree of support and understanding. So, you know, it wasn't that the series was made in a frenzy of insecurity and negativity. It was very hard, but you had to be up for it, and if you weren't, you would have hated it and gone away, you know. Elizabeth Moss came off that flight at Queenstown Airport in really sensible clothes with her Ugg boots, really up for it.
Yeah.
She came to have an adventure, and we all did. When we were at our best. I mean, you know, we weren't always at our best, but when we were at our best, that was kind of how it was.
Awesome. And how do you feel your approach as a producer has changed as a result of that adventure?
It's confirmed things for me, which is kind of good. It's made me demanding of stories, and you know, I think there's a terrible thing if I ever feel myself going, that's good enough. I really beat myself up. It's, I think, a terrible thing. And I think, you know, it's I try not to say that. I think that's a curse. So, and I think the aspiration of Top of the Lake and the achievement of it is something that is now sort of imprinted in me. And it's not that the aspiration and achievement of the other films I produced was any less intense or passionately felt, but this is just on such a big scale.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, I'm really interested in making more work of this nature and of this scale, because I have and I can, and I'd love to find a way to, you know, make something else here, make something abroad. I'm interested in it. It's a very powerful genre, and I'd love to do something again. I mean, it's hard to do from here, especially, but you know, it's worth giving a go.
And do you think that's the sort of looking at your crystal ball? Do you think things are moving more in the direction of the small screen, more productions such as this, rather than the kind of communal cinema experience, or what are your kind of projections there?
Well, they're not really my projections. I mean, the facts are out there that the film industry is, you know, very conventional, and making the sorts of films that I like to go and see all over the world is increasingly difficult. And it's not that making television is high-end television is easy, but it's certainly something that audiences are embracing, and so, you know, people with money are seeing that it's a way that they might make a buck. So, yeah, I mean, there's big debates all over, you know, is the newspaper dead, is the feature film dead, you know, whatever. There's still a way to deliver television to audiences, high-end television that great writers and great actors and great cinematographers and great directors are interested in doing. So it's a form that a lot of focus is on at the moment, and has been. I mean, Top of the Lake isn't the first in that respect at all. I mean, there's been some terrific stuff. Like, it started about 10 years ago, and it's just, you know, it's very good. Yeah.
I might just open it up to the floor for a few questions now, and then I'll come back in with a few more at the end. So, anybody got any questions? Stephen?
Philippa, what was Seesaw? You said they were a great company. Could you tell us a little bit more about that?
They're really good to hang out with. I'm not being. They're an international company, so Seesaw never closes. You know, 24 hours. They have. They're very sophisticated in terms of financing, and they've won Academy Awards, which means they have access to. It's not as Amir would said at one point. People always will pick up the phone when I call, but I don't always get what I want. You know, so but they have access, great access. I also think they have just a real commitment to the work that they make. a real enthusiasm and sort of passion and commitment to what they're doing, and that's terrific. They're really committed. They care about it, and they work really, really hard to make things happen in the way that their filmmakers and the people they work with sort of all agree. So they're very collaborative in that sense. Yeah. And I think they've got, I don't like all the films they've made, but I think they've got really good taste.
Yeah.
They've got great taste.
So were they very hands-on? Were they here on the ground in New Zealand during production?
Yeah, they were. I mean, I had hoped that Emil would be there for more, but he's a sensible producer. He's got a big company and other films on the go and all the rest of it. So he wasn't there as much as I'd hoped he would be.
Yeah.
But he would come regularly and cheer us all up when we were feeling blue and go, "Oh my God, this is so amazing!" And and help, be very helpful, be really helpful to have a great brain come in when you're puzzling over something and you can't see the wood for the trees, in that producerial way that is incredibly boring to everybody else, but it is crucial to the engine of the production. So yeah, he was there on a regular basis.
Awesome. And Ian stayed over in the UK, or?
Ian did come out once.
Yeah.
And I was trying to remember whether it was in pre-production when we were shooting, and I can't count.
Yeah.
But he did come out once.
Any more questions? Yep.
What was the biggest thing that you learned going through that process of making Top of the Lake? If you could just talk about one key thing, the biggest thing that you learned from that process.
Could you guys hear the question?
Not really.
It was if Philippa could boil down to the one sort of most lasting kind of learning from her process on Top of the Lake.
It's kind of a two-part answer, Sue, but it's very brief. That it's possible, and to make sure that my ideas and approaches have as big a scale as they possibly can.
Awesome. Evan.
Yeah, for such a lengthy project, both in terms of shooting and development and I guess post as well as development, as a producer, how do you deal with other projects you might be in development? Like how much attention, at what point did you have to go, okay, I'm dropping everything for this amazing project, and at what point did you have to start thinking, okay, how do I start picking those things back up again?
I'm really bad at figuring out how to do that. Other producers are really good at their own career project management. They have something waiting, ready to go. I still haven't learned that lesson. I need to figure that one out. I had thought I would be able to do something on a documentary, to co-produce a documentary during Top of the Lake. I knew it was going to sort of stop at some point, but I had to withdraw from the project because I just simply didn't have any room in my brain, which I was very disappointed about. But so it really was a completely immersive experience for me. And there are also some filmmakers who have waited very patiently. Well, were pissed off, but had to wait patiently. I mean, they could have said, "I don't want to wait. I'll go and find another producer," but they didn't, and I'm very pleased about that. And they waited patiently for me to come back into the world, which was in post-production.
Yep.
Can I ask about two stages in the creative process that I heard you mention? One of them was the round table in Sydney with all the scripts before the shoot began, and the other one was at a point in the editing where there were cuts, there were programs to look at before all the other post stuff happened, which sounded like two occasions when there was a team of people gathered to discuss pretty fully what they had and where they were going to go next. Could you talk a little bit about those
Does it? Yeah. There were actually 3, Fiona. So I'll talk about the one I haven't spoken about because in a way that was, that was as important. The round table in Sydney were the writers and the directors, one of whom was the same person. So Garth, Jared, Jane, the 2 key financiers, nobody from Screen Australia, so it was the BBC and Sundance, and the producers. So it was very intimate. The second sort of round table which we had we spent when we were in pre-production, and we spent a day each with the directors. I don't think Jared was there, or maybe he was, I can't remember. Jane, Jared, and the heads of department and me going through each episode, and it was kind of like the director sort of spoke about their view of the story and the themes and how they were going to, and the atmospheres and the feelings in the episode, and how we would all achieve that together, and we discussed that. And that time in pre-production was a really, really important sort of memory bank for all of us, those of us who were there, to draw on. I mean, the scripts were not rewritten at all. You know, they were a little bit, but you know, we had scripts. This is not a project that's devised or mucked around with on set in a let's all just change what we're doing kind of a way. You know, I mean, it was Top of the Lake was there as a story that we had to explore and be challenged by and understand. But those 6 sessions were really, again, put enormous pressure on the rest of the crew, because they were waiting for their HOTs to come back with this, you know, they were working hard, you know, but for us it was, they were terrific. And it meant that we had a shared understanding, and we could go back to that time 3 months later and go, but that's right, or whatever. And then in post-production, we worked out of a really beautiful place in Sydney, and Garth and his editor worked in Melbourne for a bit, and then, but as things got closer to being locked, it would all happen in Sydney. And it was incredibly collaborative. I mean, there were all sorts of protocols about cutting rooms, as those of you who are filmmakers know, and who gets into the cutting room and who doesn't. And, you know, it's all about trust. It was really, really interesting how collaborative those cutting rooms were, where directors would be nipping in to assist each other, and both on cuts, and that really did engender great conversation and sometimes, you know, vivid argument, but it all was sort of us coming to terms with what Top of the Lake was, and what we were, you know, those final key decisions that sometimes are really hard to make. And you know, there was both the directors and both the teams had some major things they had to rework, and some painful decisions to make, but that sort of real sense of, there was a real sense of support, actually. I mean, I'm making it all sound like a love fest. There were also hard times and, you know, conflict and all the rest of it, but that was quite genuinely, and once, it was so enjoyable, actually. I mean, I love post-production because I wasn't worried about all the delivery. We had wonderful person delivering to the BBC, and delivering to the BBC is just a nightmare. Yeah. So I didn't have to worry about that really. I just had all the good bits.
Yeah, cool.
That's good.
Any other questions?
Oh, and the composer. The composer was there too. Yeah.
Edie?
Last week I got to meet Garth from Melbourne.
before.
I mean, it's so great, and you know, we kind of think, great, television's so exciting now, and we can make these kind of movie television style things. But how do you see that this will happen, or do you think it's like, do you have to be Jane Campion, or how will it happen? If not.
Well, you have to be a great storyteller, and you have to be committed to storytelling in a particular kind of a way. And if you're not, then it's not the medium, it's not the form for you. That, you know, the 3 pages that Jane wrote, which was like her visionary statement, they could have, they're written by Jane Campion, it's her thing, you know, it's her voice and her vision, a shared vision with Jerry, but still her kind of thing, like an arrow into the darkness, a lit arrow into the darkness. But she has a commitment. She's a great reader. She loves reading novels. I mean, it's one of her favourite pastimes. So yes, novelistic television. If you are a great reader and you're a great writer, there's no reason why, being A.D. Walker, you couldn't come up with a depth of story. Huh? But I'm not saying it's not easy, and it's not something she did when she was 21. I mean, I sort of did this on Rain, and that stood me in good stead, that experience. So we made a children's script, which was all the action of the kids, that all the kids did in the series, in a line, which was a bit strange to read, but it meant that they could read what they did. That was their bit of the world. And the parents were given the option, if they wanted to read the whole script, they all did. To read the confidence to read the script, and there was a sort of that whole area. There were lots of people in Queenstown who really were very suspicious of Top of the Lake because it's not something that the New Zealand Tourist Board would make. Yeah.
Yep.
I just had a question, Philippa, about this 3-page document and what about it really interested you and drew you in, and whether you could elaborate on that.
Yeah, I should have bought it actually, because I could have read something out. It's like when people say just write a couple of pages to give us a sense of your film, and you go, oh my God, that's so hard. It's one of those. So it evokes very cleverly. It evokes the story, and it talks about the sort of spiritual underpinning of the questions in the story, and it talks about the mystery story too. I mean, there's an engine in Top of the Lake which is a mystery. It's not a procedural crime show, so it goes kind of beyond that. And for people that want that, they get frustrated with it because our detective doesn't do an enormous amount of detecting. She does a hell of a lot of stuff, but there's not, it's not too much detecting that goes on. But there is
too busy getting it on.
That's
what kept me on.
With your curtains closed.
Yeah. Hey, I watched it with my girlfriend. It was a good experience. Yeah.
He's going to do his one-man show for you now.
Oh, no. More questions, please. Howdy, Mo. Yeah.
She thought there was that Jackie, she and Jackie got on like a house on fire. This is Jackie who plays Tui Jacqueline. And Holly was really angry one day about something that happened to the schedule where she thought that Jackie had been exploited. She was really upset on her behalf. Had she been exploited? Not really. It was something that was unfortunate that happened, but did we? It had been and gone. I mean, it was like this happened. It shouldn't have happened. It was one of those.
So how did you feel after wrapping production? What was your headspace like after that?
I was really tired.
Yeah.
I was like, well, there's always that thing of, oh, thank God it's finished, but oh, it's finished. You know, so you've got to disconnect from the people and also the place. That place is pretty extraordinary, and I get drawn back to it now. I know I'm going to be going back down there for the rest of my life every now and again because it's kind of a remarkable place. Looking at someone who lives around the corner from it. It is a remarkable place, and and also because, you know, it wasn't over for me because I had post-production and, you know, the rest of it. So it's not like just working on the shooting crew, because shooting crews think it's all about the shoot. And, you know, that's a hugely important part, but it's one part of the whole process. So, but yes, I was really tired. I was really, really excited, but I was really tired.
So you felt after the shoot, you definitely had that buzz of feeling like the magic was in the can going into the edit?
Yeah, I mean, I told this to Fraser Brown, who I'm working with at the moment. I said to him how much I really didn't like rap parties very much. And I don't know, do you like rap parties, Tom?
No, not particularly. No.
But we had at the rap party, everybody, you know, we had shot for 4 months. Everybody had got to know everybody, and you know, there was a few liaisons. 3 babies had been born. You know, we were sort of a bit of a, you know, we were a fun kind of group, and we had a feeling that we were making something really special. Everybody did feel that, and I. With the complicity of Jane's editor, Alexander Di Franceschi, if any of you ever get a chance to work with him, he's extraordinary. Alexander never came to set. The editors stayed in Australia, but they would both send us responses to the footage. And Alexander is my favourite pen pal of all time, because I would go to the office eventually or pick up emails, and there would be Alexander's response to the footage, and he speaks Italian and Spanish and French and English, and he writes really beautifully and quite romantically. And I would just live for his reports, because it was, he would just respond just in a way that was like just like life being breathed into the project when you were feeling tired, you know. Anyway, so I said, there's always a bit of a cry for, can we have something, you know, can the crew see something? And it's very easy to put a bloopers reel together, but a bloopers reel wasn't going to work on Top of the Lake because they'd all made their own bloopers reels endlessly during the shoot. But I managed to, and Jane left us a week before we wrapped. She finished 5 days before Gar. And that was a really difficult time because we all there was a very emotional farewell, and I thought, oh, well, we all fall apart without her, but we didn't. But we really didn't. It was just fabulous. And
why did she head off early?
well, she'd finished,
Right.
and she had work to do in the cutting room,
Yeah.
and it was always her decision. She kind of knew that was best for her. She also, and she had to go somewhere. She had to go somewhere for someone being an important person reason, but she also, she was really, you know, there were lots of phone calls and messages, and, you know, she found it quite hard too. But anyway, that was the decision, and we all lived through it. But the rap party, Alexander persuaded Jane that it would be a good idea to show some of the work. And one of his assistants, and he worked on a 15-minute version of everything. From everything. So we got this 15-minute, incredibly well put together sort of blast of what we made, what we'd shot, you know, on Top of the Lake. And we were in this pretty slightly sleazy, as all Queenstown is, nightclub place. And it was a top secret. We'd had to sign, because of all the piracy issues, we had to, you know, there was one version of it and one person knew. I was the only person, 2 people knew about it. And I had to sign my life away in blood, and I couldn't warn anyone, because the minute I told one person, it would have gone. So I couldn't tell Lizzie, I couldn't tell Adam, but me and one person from the art department knew, and we sort of rigged up this. We had to rig up a projector, and the only way we could project it was through the the pole dancing pole onto a bare wall, and I thought, oh, this stuff looks so beautiful, and everybody's going to see it through the pole. So afterwards I ran around and apologised to review, but it was an absolute blind. I mean, it was a bit of a mind fuck, really. I burst into tears, other people burst into tears. It was just extraordinary. And that was a great gift.
Awesome. Any more questions?
Right, I just wondered, it might be too early for you to get a sense of this, but what do you think, it's had huge critical success and is being shown all around the world. What do you think it's going to mean? I know you're really modest too, but for you as a producer?
It's going to move me as a producer. Look, there are lots and lots of producers like me in the rest of the world, and if I'm the wrong age and the wrong sex and the wrong temperament to make a late player working in Hollywood.
Rubbish.
I'd love to extract things from Hollywood. I'd like to collaborate with power and money, but wouldn't we all? But so if I was younger and ambitious in a slightly different way, it would be incredibly, especially the Emmys would be, really, really kind of useful. So I'm sort of seeing how things are going to play out. I mean, as I said, when you said why this, and it was a beautiful accident. And it's not that those things are based on stuff. It's not that I just sort of pull out weeds in my garden and wait for beautiful accidents to happen, because that's not what it's like at all. But I mean, already what it's meant is that other people from around the world have confidence that I can work with them on big projects. Some internationally and some here. But being me, of course, I've chosen really and got really interested in some really difficult things, like an Indian-New Zealand co-production, shot in New Zealand, which is a metaphorical story about Kashmir. I mean, I think it's an extraordinary story, and it's really hard to do. But as somebody asked me what I learned, so what I sort of learned, this is very big. And I went, hang on, if this is the lesson from the top of the lake, it's big, and I think it's really important and terrific. I'll give it a go.
So moving forward is what is it that gets you most excited, Philippa, about doing what you do? Just more generally.
The creative elements always do. I mean, I get profoundly depressed about the financial elements. And I'm not as athletic in business as I am creatively. So I need to work with people who are really strong in that area and give good advice. But that's what keeps me going. And also, it is very simple too, and it's about getting a story in front of an audience. It's about entertainment. There's nothing like being in an audience and your films being played. It's amazing, isn't it? It's just fabulous, and all that stuff that happens. I mean, the response we had at Sundance was hilarious, because there were lots of us there. We had the biggest entourage ever, and it was very funny. So we were having a good time. But after 6 hours with that audience, it was like we were all best friends, and we should have really just had a barbecue in the snow.
Yeah.
It would have been.
How many sessions did they do for the 6 hours? Oh, one marathon. Wow. Intermission?
Yeah, 2 toilet breaks.
Yeah. That's fascinating.
The Germans only had 1 toilet break, and the audience was told that they had 14 minutes break. I don't know how they got that 14 minutes, but anyway, obedient as the great Berliners may be, they didn't manage to get back to their seats in 14 minutes.
So just a couple more questions. One from just something I want to know personally is, what does your development slate usually look like? Like how many projects are you usually working on at any one time? I know that would vary, but what's the day-to-day life of Philippa Campbell like?
It's really messy. I multitask. Some of you know I also work in the theatre. I have too many projects, but you know they're sort of prioritised towards what's closest to production or what's in production. So currently, I'm sort of separating things out in my head at the moment in terms of international work and local work. 2 projects. The one that's closest to production is a film by writer-director Dustin Fennerly called Stray, and we were at Cinema this year and at 37 South, talking to money people. And I'm in the process of putting a financing around that, hopefully, and we will shoot it next autumn. Yeah.
Exciting. And how do you pick a project? How do you make that decision?
How do you?
Well, I mean, no, how do you?
Well, it's about the person or people involved. It's about the quality of the material, whatever it is, the idea or the sketch or the, you know, however it comes to you. Sometimes they come in a really unconventional way, which is interesting. And it's also about the ideas. I'm quite big on what it's really about.
Yeah.
That's important to me, and I have to think about whether I can finance it and whether I think it's got an audience.
And are those last 2, are they things that have come into your thinking later in your career, the finding an audience and the more kind of pragmatic side of it?
No, they've always been there, but in a particular way. I mean, so the thing about, I mean, I trained as an actor many years ago, and I've been on stage and looked through a curtain and gone, are there enough people in the audience for us to do the show tonight? Whatever that cast plus one thing used to be an equity rule. That's I understand what audiences are, and I appreciate the nature of audiences. They're very important to us, and we're communicators, so that's sort of vital. The sort of ecosystem of financing is really, really complex. And you have to have faith that there are investors out there that are for you and not just for everybody else. I mean, for you meaning your tribe of filmmakers or program makers. And you kind of have to go out there and find them. And that's also a development process. I mean, that's been a huge development process for me, because the first film I produced was a little bit like an escalator film. It was a scheme. It was via satellite by Anthony McCartan, and it was an adaptation of a play. It was a scheme like Escalator that Starfish came out of, and Stickmen and those films. And so the money was there, and once we got the script to a certain stage, it was greenlit. So it's a bit like Max's film.
Sure.
And so I didn't even have to go to a board meeting at the Film Commission. You know, so all that, how it all works in terms of agency financing and independent financing. That's been.
Yeah, you started with the creative.
I started with
a
a box, a packet of money, and then I had to figure out how to get it later.
Yeah. And how much are you kind of integrating alternative ways of finding audiences into your plan at the moment moving forward?
Today, not much. I mean, I'm in awe of some of the social media work that you young guys are doing. I just need to partner with you and get you to help me. It's true, you know, it's not I don't feel comfortable in that space, as we say. I'm quite suspicious of a whole lot of bullshit that goes on. But I also know that that there are also exciting things that happen around campaigns to find audiences. But it's becoming more and more cliche written to me. You know, community building. If I hear that one more time, join our community. You know, I mean, you have to.
Yeah.
But I think there are. I mean, I think Fraser and Carla have done an amazing job around orphans and kingdoms, and I'm sort of too shy to do that. But you know, I have to figure out how to unlock that sort of side of getting audiences. I mean, people are really smart. They'll come to good stuff.
Okay, just a couple of questions to finish off. Yep.
Me?
Yep.
I've been funded mostly by Berlinale projects, and now I'm starting to look around at other funding, like John Commission and other places, and I find it quite overwhelming. I've discovered 37 Degrees and Melbourne Film Festival and Screen Australia. How do you kind of get that information about financing and funding? Is it going and networking and going to film festivals and markets, and is it just evolution?
The question was just about how do we build our knowledge around alternate funding sources after maybe relying on one particular funding source for a sustained period?
Yeah, I think there's nothing like going to those financing markets. It's really, really useful. I've been lucky to have colleagues, and I've gone to people for advice. You know, Sue Thompson's up there. She helped me put money into Black Sheep. I went to her going, I need this much money. Have you got any ideas? And of course she did. So, you know, I do ask questions of people I trust, and it's always stood me in really good stead. So I'd advise, you know, if there's somebody in the industry that you admire and you think, God, they're really great at putting deals together, go and see if they'll buy them a cup of tea and see if they'll spend an hour with you. People are quite protective of their, you know, their guys, but in principle people will generally explain the structure, but there's nothing, or the different kinds of structures, and it is like an ecosystem, and it changes all the time. But there's nothing like experiencing it yourself. You do learn an enormous amount. And there are ways of going to a market, even, I think you need to be purposeful, and you don't want to waste people's time. But there are ways of going to a market thinking, okay, this is research. I mean, I was at 32nd South recently, and I spoke to some companies that were not the least bit interested in 3 of the projects that I was talking about. They might be interested in something that I'm sort of cooking up with someone else internationally, but so what I said was, I don't want to waste your time, but can you answer these questions? And out of that, we always had a really interesting discussion. Yeah, but I do recommend it. I think it's really valuable, and the markets in Australia are the cheapest, closest ones to get to. Yeah.
And one last question. Any last ones? Well, I think we're pretty much on time. Philippa, thank you so much for taking the time today. It's been an absolute pleasure. And yeah, best of luck with the awards. Here's hoping